The text came on a Tuesday, right as I was pouring my first coffee of the afternoon. We feel it's best for everyone if you take some time for yourself away from the family for a while. It was in the main family group, the one with my parents, my brother Ben, and my sister-in-law Hannah. Beneath it, Hannah had reacted with a heart, as if they were sending me off on a spa vacation, not exiling me. I think that was the part that stung the most, the sheer, performative kindness of it, the way it tried to dress up a cold, corporate dismissal in the language of concern. They weren't even brave enough to call it a punishment. I stared at the screen, the steam from my mug curling into the still air of my apartment. My hand was perfectly steady, which surprised me. I suppose a part of me had been waiting for this, a part that had been quietly bracing for the other shoe to drop for years. The calm I felt was a relief. Not yet. It was the eerie stillness that follows a long-awaited diagnosis. I typed my reply, my fingers moving with a cold, deliberate calm. Understood. I will respect your wishes and take a step back from all family obligations, including the trust. I didn't call it the family trust. I called it the trust, because that's what had always been between us, a test I was constantly failing, a burden I was never meant to set down. I hit send. I didn't wait for a reply. There was nothing more to say. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in the dark, tracing the patterns of the streetlights on my ceiling, listening to the distant hum of the city. A lifetime of conditioning screamed at me to call, to apologize, to fix whatever I had broken. But I hadn't broken anything. I had simply finally heard them. Then, at 2 a.m., I got up, went to my home office, and logged into the system. It wasn't just an account. It was a complex, intricate network of financial instruments I had meticulously built and managed over 7 years. A master account, funded entirely by my earnings, with a series of automated disbursements and credit lines linked to their individual lives. I was the silent architect of their stability, the ghost in the machine of their financial well-being. With a few clicks, I revoked all authorized users, canceled all scheduled transfers, and closed every linked credit card and line of credit. The final step was dissolving the main trust fund itself. It took 20 minutes. A 7-year structure dismantled in 20 minutes. The confirmation email arrived at 2:24 a.m. I went back to bed and slept more deeply than I had in a decade. The sleep of the condemned who has just been granted a surprise pardon. The buzzing started at 4:07 a.m. A relentless, angry hum against my nightstand, a sound of pure panic. I let it go to voicemail. It buzzed again, and again. It was a symphony of unraveling dependency. By the time the sun crept over the city skyline, painting the buildings in hues of orange and gray, my screen showed 73 missed calls. The last voicemail was from my father. His voice was a strained, panicked whisper, the voice of a man watching the levees break. The bank! Everything is frozen. Alerts, flags. What did you do? Are you all right? Call me back. Now. I replied to his last text, the one from the group chat. I am honoring your decision. I sent it, then put my phone on silent. That was before they realized the true scope of the scaffolding I had removed. They thought they were asking the quiet, reliable son to take a hike. They didn't realize they were firing the entire support staff, the accountant, the banker, and the benefactor, all in one fell swoop. To understand why that message felt less like a request and more like a final, formal dismissal, you have to go back 7 years, to when Ben's drinking went from a problem to a crisis. I got the call from my mother, her voice thin with a terror I'd never heard before, a wire stretched to its snapping point. He crashed the car. He's in the hospital. The insurance, there are issues. They're talking about a lawsuit. I was 28, climbing the ladder at a private equity firm. My own life a neatly ordered spreadsheet of ambition and controlled risk. Without a second thought, I liquidated a chunk of my portfolio and wired the money. I hired the lawyer. I handled the settlement. Ben went to rehab. When he got out, everyone called it a miracle. My father clapped me on the shoulder and said, "You're a good man." No one ever mentioned the money. No one asked how I'd managed it, what I had sacrificed to make it happen. It was simply absorbed, the first brick in a foundation of expectation that was being laid, brick by heavy brick. It didn't stop. It never stopped. My father's consulting business hit a dry patch. My mother needed a new car. Hannah, from the moment she married Ben, developed a talent for finding financial black holes, a failed online boutique, a series of questionable investments, a constant stream of minor emergencies that required immediate cash. And Ben, once recovered, simply swapped one dependency for another, now with a voracious appetite for expensive hobbies and speculative ventures that always failed. They came to me, always quietly, always with a tone of shared, reluctant burden. We know it's a lot to ask. Just this one time, if you could just see your way to... I was the financially literate one, the stable one, the one without drama. It made sense, I told myself. A twisted, warped sense, but sense nonetheless. I had the means. So I built a system. I created the trust. I didn't want the constant, ad hoc requests, so I automated their lives. Their mortgages were paid from it. Their car payments, insurance premiums, utility bills, all drafted automatically. I gave them credit cards linked to the fund for groceries and gas. I became the family's chief financial officer, treasurer, and benefactor, all without a title, without a thank you, without any authority beyond the power of purse, which they were all too happy to let me hold so long as it remained open. My life became a monument to quiet subsidization. I stayed in my modest 2-bedroom apartment while my colleagues moved into penthouses. I took staycations while they posted from Bali. I drove a 5-year-old sedan. My own financial goals were deferred. My savings rate a fraction of what it could have been, because I was supporting a second shadow household that operated with a bottomless pit of need. I maintained a meticulous private ledger. It wasn't for them. It was for me. A record to prove to myself that I wasn't going mad, that the river of money flowing out of my life was real, that the weight on my shoulders had a quantifiable mass. The gratitude, what little there had been, curdled into entitlement within a couple of years. The thank yous became, "Why isn't this working?" The requests became demands. The Christmas 2 years ago was a turning point, the moment the mask slipped completely. Ben and Hannah wanted to go to Aspen. The trust they assumed would cover it. I said no. The fund was for necessities, not luxury ski trips. The fallout was nuclear. Ben accused me of controlling him, of holding money over his head, of trying to keep him down. Hannah cried, real, theatrical tears about how they never got to have any fun. My mother called me the next day, her voice laced with a weary disappointment. "Can't you just do this for them? For family harmony? You know how hard they're trying. It's just money." I didn't argue. What was the point? But something in me solidified that day, turned to stone. I began my documentation in earnest. Not just the amounts, but the context. I saved emails, text messages, voicemails. I created a digital fortress of evidence, not because I planned to use it, but because I needed an anchor in the gaslit sea of their narrative, a way to hold on to my own sanity. The final catalyst came just a month before the text. Ben announced in the family group that he was planning to become a life coach. He needed certification, which cost $15,000. He'd already signed up for the course, putting the cart miles before the horse, as was his habit. My father replied, "So proud of you, son, taking charge of your life." My mother added a series of fire emojis. Then The inevitable tag. Bro, can the trust handle the tuition? I'll pay it back on my first big client. I didn't respond. I watched the chat, waiting. The assumption was palpable, a thick, suffocating certainty that of course I would cover it, that my purpose, my function in this family, was to fund their whims and absolve them of consequence. 2 days later, we had a video call. I tried to talk about my own life, about a major project I was leading that was exceeding all targets, a genuine achievement I was proud of. My father cut me off. That's great, really. But let's focus on Ben right now. This coaching thing could be the making of him. I said very quietly, my voice barely a whisper. Perhaps Ben could focus on making himself first, before taking on more debt. The silence was instantaneous and absolute. It was like I had uttered a blasphemy in a cathedral. The disapproval was a physical force through the screen. I had broken the cardinal rule. I had suggested accountability. And then, 2 days after that, the text arrived. We feel it's best for everyone if you take some time for yourself away from the family for a while. The heart from Hannah. They thought they were punishing me. They were giving me a timeout from the family. They had no idea they were revoking their own access to the life support system I had built. They saw me as a disobedient component. They didn't realize I was a power source. The fallout was swift and spectacular. It took less than 48 hours for the first domino to fall. The automatic mortgage payment on my parents' house failed. Then the health insurance premiums bounced. The credit cards were declined at the grocery store, at the gas station. The bank, seeing a cascade of failed payments and the sudden closure of a major account, locked their primary checking account for suspected fraud. Their digitally enabled lives, a life of convenience I had built for them, crumbled into analog chaos. My phone became a weapon of mass hysteria. Ben called, screaming about his car being repossessed. Hannah sent a torrent of weeping, accusatory voice notes. How could you be so cruel? We have children. What will we tell them? My mother's messages were a masterclass in passive aggression. I suppose you're happy now. Showing us all how much we need you. Is this the control you wanted? My father's text devolved from confused anger to sheer, unvarnished panic. The bank is talking about foreclosure. You have to call them. You have to fix this. You know how these things work. As if I had broken something. As if I hadn't simply turned off the tap they had been drinking from for years. A tap they refused to believe was connected to my own well. The climax was a forced video call, orchestrated by a well-meaning but naive cousin who thought, we just need to talk. I joined to find them arrayed against me in a neat grid of collective outrage. My father red-faced and puffing, my mother weeping silent, performative tears, Ben glaring with pure, undiluted hatred. Hannah clutching her phone like a talisman against the reality I represented. You've destroyed this family, Ben spat, his voice trembling with a rage that was too big for his body. I've stopped funding it, I replied calmly. There's a difference. How could you be so selfish, my mother cried, dabbing at her eyes. After all we've done for you, we raised you. What have you done for me? I asked, genuinely curious, the question hanging in the digital space between us. In the last 7 years, what have you asked about my life that didn't somehow circle back to money? Have you ever asked about my work, my health, my dreams, my fears? Or have I just been the solution to a problem? This isn't about you, Ben shouted, slamming his hand on his desk. Exactly, I said, my voice dropping, becoming even quieter, which forced him to listen. It never is. Then I shared my screen. The master ledger appeared, a stark, beautiful, terrifying landscape of financial data. 7 years of transactions, column after column of dates, descriptions, amounts. Mortgage payments, car notes, insurance, Ben's rehab, Hannah's failed boutique, the lawyer fees, The constant cash infusions, the loans that were never repaid. I scrolled slowly, relentlessly, letting the sheer, overwhelming volume of it sink in, the endless river of my money flowing into the black hole of their lives. "You've been spying on us," my father whispered, his face a mask of horror, as if I had committed the greater sin by recording the crime. "I've been accounting for my life," I said, my voice flat. "The life I put on hold to fund yours. This isn't surveillance. It's memory." I navigated to the summary tab. The total, calculated to the penny, was $214,887.55. The silence was deafening. It was a void. Ben looked like he'd been gut-punched, all the air leaving him. Hannah had stopped crying and was just staring, her mouth slightly agape, at the number. It was one thing to know, abstractly, that I helped. It was another to see the brutal, cumulative truth of it. You kept a tally?" my mother said, her voice dripping with a disgust so profound it seemed to shock even her. "No," I said, my voice flat and cold as a river stone. "I kept the truth. This number? This is the cost of your comfort. This is the price of my silence. And I'm done paying it." Then I delivered the final blow, the words I had practiced in my head 1,000 times. "I've removed myself from all your financial instruments. The trust is dissolved. The credit lines are closed. You are now, as you so clearly want me to be, on your own. You'll need to contact your creditors and banks yourselves. I've also retained a lawyer. Any further attempts to access my credit or use my name for financial purposes will be treated as fraud. I have all the evidence I need." "You're cutting us off," Ben shrieked, his voice cracking, a child denied a toy. "I'm setting myself free," I corrected him, my gaze steady. My father, his face ashen, the bluster gone, finally spoke the quiet part out loud, the question that had underpinned every interaction for years. "What are we supposed to do now?" I looked directly into the camera, into the lens, making sure my gaze found each of them in their little digital boxes. "Figured out." I ended the call. My hands were shaking, a fine tremor that ran up my arms, but my mind was clearer than it had been in years, washed clean by a wave of brutal, necessary finality. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of potential I had forgotten existed, a future that was mine and mine alone. The attempts at contact continued, of course. Guilt-trip emails about family birthdays feeling empty, pleading texts in the dead of night, a surprise visit from my mother at my gym where she staged a tearful scene in the lobby for an audience of confused strangers. I held firm. I had built my fortress of evidence, and now I lived within its walls, and the walls were strong. The true test, the moment that proved the absolute necessity of my actions, came 6 weeks later. I received a formal-looking letter from a credit union I had no affiliation with. Someone had attempted to take out a small business loan for $50,000. The business was listed as Bennett Life Coaching and Wellness, LLC. The primary applicant was Ben, and listed as a co-signer, with my social security number and a clumsily forged signature, was me. I felt a cold fury, so pure and sharp it was almost exhilarating. This was no longer about need or entitlement. This was about fraud. They hadn't just tried to use me. They had tried to legally chain me to Ben's latest illusion, to make me responsible for his failure before it even happened. The only reason it was flagged was because of the comprehensive credit freeze I had instituted the day after dissolving the trust. I didn't call them. I didn't text. I called the police. I filed a formal report for identity theft and fraud. I went to the station, sat down with a detective, and submitted the forged document, a printed copy of my ledger, and a curated file of text messages showing Ben's previous requests and their escalating nature. It was clinical, dispassionate, the final, logical severing of the cord. It was no longer emotional. It was legal. Ben called me once, from an unknown number a few days after I'd filed a report. He didn't mention the loan. He didn't yell. He just said, his voice flat and rehearsed, "I get it now. I'm sorry. We're family. That's what matters." His words were empty. A script. "Did you forge my signature on a loan application?" I asked, my voice devoid of any emotion. The silence on the other end was thick, guilty, and all the answer I needed. Then a soft click. I blocked the number for the last time. There was nothing left to say. That was the true end of it. The line was not just drawn. It was cemented over, reinforced with steel and patrolled by lawyers. I moved to a different city a few months later, a promotion I could finally accept because my money was my own, my energy was my own. I bought a house with a view of the mountains, a view that was mine. I started sleeping through the night, a deep, dreamless sleep I hadn't known since childhood. A year after the text, my life is my own. The silence is no longer eerie. It is peaceful, a blanket, a gift. My phone is for friends and for work. My money is for my future, for my investments, for my joys. The weight is gone. The ledger is closed. I heard through the grapevine from that same cousin that they had to sell my parents' house to settle the debts. Ben and Hannah moved in with her parents. I don't know if they're happier. I don't know if they've learned anything. I know I am. I know I have. The other day, I was getting a coffee from a shop near my new office, and I saw an old family friend, Mrs. Gable, who had always been close to my mother. She looked at me, a mixture of pity and judgment in her eyes, the keeper of the family mythology. "They're struggling, you know," she said, her tone implying I was responsible for the weather. "Your family. It's a shame, a real shame." I took my coffee, the porcelain warm in my hand. I looked at her, completely at peace, the peace that comes from having fought a long war and won. "I know," I said, my voice even in calm, "but they're not my family anymore. They're just people I used to know." And I walked away into the sunlight, into my own life, finally, unquestionably, and absolutely free.